You're watching a production of South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
State House program funding provided by the South Dakota Bar Foundation, the educational and charitable arm of South Dakota lawyers and judges.
State of the State Address. We are coming to you live today from the State Capitol building in Pierce, South Dakota. I'm Stephanie Rissler alongside Kara Hetland.
Good afternoon, and you're listening online on radio or on watching us on TV, and we'll have complete coverage throughout the entire 90th legislative session. It's just getting underway today and runs through March 13th. Veto Day is on March 30th. Lawmakers were sworn in over the weekend.
It was a celebration over the weekend with the inaugural, all of our governor, constitutional officers, followed by the Grand March and Capitol Ball. We're here now waiting for our 32nd governor to deliver the State of the State for 2015. Right now we do have our new Speaker of the House, Dean Wink. He is taking the podium. We come off an election year, so we'll have several new faces, including several new leadership, including our Speaker of the House. I think now we'll throw it down to the floor and listen to Speaker Dean Wink.
Please make welcome the Lieutenant Governor of the state of South Dakota, Mr. Matt Michaels.
Thank you so much. It's very humbling. Thank you, Speaker, and congratulations on your election, sir. We'll call this joint session to hear the Governor's State of the State Address to order. And leading us in our prayer at this point in time is Pastor Sarah Goldhammer of the Fort Pierre Ministerial Association. And then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance if you would remain standing after that.
Let us pray. Almighty and everlasting God, you guide and govern everything with order and love. We ask that you continue to look upon the governor of South Dakota and fill him with the spirit of your wisdom. We pray that he may execute the laws with justice and mercy. In the same way, we ask that you look upon the men and women who are gathered here as representatives of the people, that they may always act in accordance with your will and their decisions be for the peace and well-being of all. We pray for our judges, elected city officials, or elected civil officials, and others who are entrusted to guide our political welfare, that they would also be imparted with your wisdom and strength, that their actions and duties be carried out with honesty and ability. We also ask you to be with the citizens of South Dakota, that they would know you, your peace, and enjoy the blessings of this life. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Senate roll call by the Senate. Please be seated. Secretary of the Senate, please call the roll.
Senators Bradford, Brown, Buell O'Donnell, Kamak, Curd, Ewing, Frericks, Greenfield, Hager, Haverly, Heineman, Heinert, Holeen, Hanoff, Jensen, Liederman, Monroe, Norstrup, Olson, Amdahl, Otten, Parsley, Peters, Peterson, Ramberg, Brave, Rush, Soholt, Solano, Sutton, Tiedemann, Teason, Van Gerpen, Valley, and White. Quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you. House roll call, Madam Clerk.
Representative Anderson, Bartling, Beal, Bolin, Bordeaux, Bruner, Campbell, Conzit, Craig, Cronin, Deutsch, DeSanto, Dryden, Duval, Fikert, Gibson, Gosh, Greenfield, Hager, Harrison, Daugaard, Hawks, Holly, Heineman, Hickey, Holmes, Hunhoff, Hunt, Jensen, Johns, Kaiser, Killer, Kirschman, Klum, Langer, Latterell, Marty, May, McCleary, Mickelson, Munsterman, Norstrup, Otten, Partridge, Peterson, Qualm, Rasmussen, Ring, Romkema, Rounds, Rosem, Russell, Schaefer, Schoenbeck, Shanefish, Schremp, Sly, Soley, Solom, Stalser, Stevens, Tulson, Verschio, Werner, Westra, Weck, Willitson, Woolman, Zickman, Speaker Wink. Mr. Speaker, a quorum is present.
Thank you for the joint session. There's a quorum of senators and representatives. At this time, Madam Secretary, you have a motion.
Senator Rave moves that a committee of 3 on the part of the Senate and a committee of 4 on the part of the House be appointed to escort the Honorable Dennis Daugaard, Governor of the State of South Dakota, to the rostrum.
All those in favor of that motion of escort signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. I announce the assignment of the following committees of escort: from the Senate, Senators Brown, Rave, and Sutton, and from the House of Representatives, Representatives Gosh, Westra, Hawley, and Bartling. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations to you all today. I can remember back to this day when I was able to be sworn in, and I was sitting up here right next to, at that time, Speaker Hunt. It is an incredible privilege for us to serve, but for us to serve with you, because today is a day of family. Many of your family are here today or watching or listening over the internet or television, but mind you, all of us will become family as a result of your public service, and you will make lifelong friends. It's interesting, 125 years ago, our founders wanted this to happen. They designed a system so that we would come together from different places in this state in public service, so that we would understand each other, we would understand each other's regions, we would understand each other's issues. Even though we have many people here of different ages, we come from a myriad of backgrounds and experiences, and boy, geography in this great state. Our founders spoke to us 125 years ago in the preamble to our Constitution. They wanted us to enjoy these blessings of liberty. They didn't even know us, but they wrote in their introductory paragraph that is not spoken very often, but I wish to read it today. They are speaking to us from the past, and they said that we are the people of South Dakota. We are grateful to Almighty God for our civil and religious liberties. So in order to perform and form a more perfect and independent government, we wish to establish justice and ensure tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve to ourselves and to our posterity, that's us, the blessings of liberty. And so consequently, they do ordain and establish this Constitution of the state of South Dakota. Of course, they did not know us. They most certainly did not know who the governor would be in 125 years. But they instilled in all of us, through their actions, their words, and the design of this Constitution, a mandate. I say again, a mandate that we are on this earth to serve others over ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our governor. He is the epitome and the personification of a servant leader, focused and dedicated to stewardship, financial responsibility, and the future of this great state for the betterment of our South Dakota family. Will the Sergeant at Arms please announce the arrival of the governor of the great state of South Dakota?
Lieutenant Governor and members of legislature, the Honorable Governor of the state of South Dakota, Dennis Daugaard.
Speaker. Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you. Okay, sit down now. Sit down. Sit down. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to have you back. I'd like to welcome those of you who are new to the legislature. Will those of you who are first time in the legislature please stand and be recognized? Welcome. Please stand if you're new. Welcome. Welcome. I still remember my first time here 18 years ago when I was first elected to the legislature. What a great honor that was, and I know I felt that same honor as lieutenant governor and now as governor again, and I know we all feel a shared responsibility to do the best that we can. It's my duty to open this session with some thoughts on the issues we face as a state. I'd like to begin right away today by talking to you about South Dakota's roads and bridges. Our roads are, by far, our state's most valuable physical asset, worth over $14 billion. In a rural state like South Dakota, good quality roads are our lifeline. They're not just how we get to work or school or church. They offer more than a means to get corn and soybeans to market, or the means to get tourists to Mount Rushmore or Crazy Horse. Our entire economy, indeed our very well-being, depends on road infrastructure. And right now, our roads are underfunded. From Highway 46 in Beersford to Highway 19 north of Humboldt, from Highway 73 south of Lemon to I-90 near the Wyoming border, our roads need attention. These are just a handful of the many highways that require additional maintenance. And many of our local roads are even worse in their condition. In all corners of the state, we have road funding needs. State highways, municipal streets, county oil, township gravel, and hundreds of rural bridges are in need of additional maintenance. It's like a structural deficit. We're taking more out of our roads than we're putting back into them. In South Dakota, you can see we have 82,000 miles of highways. Counties have the most total miles at around 35,000 miles. Townships just over 31,000. The state highway system is just 9.5% of the total, that blue part of the chart, at 7,800 miles. But let's look at where all the traffic is. As you can see, the state highway system, while making up only 9.5% of the state's total miles, handles more than 2/3 of all the traffic, and that includes 80% of the heavy truck traffic. The counties and municipalities each carry about 14%, followed by township roads. Many of the roads we currently use were built with no anticipation of the size and weight of the vehicles that utilize them today. Many section line roads were designed to carry vehicles weighing less than 10,000 pounds, and today trucks weighing 10 times more cross those same gravel thoroughfares. As we consider road and bridge funding, we must first understand the need. Our goal is a system of roads and bridges that meets the transportation needs of this state in the most efficient manner possible. Now, fortunately, we have the ability to calculate the cost of achieving that goal. On state highways, we have a detailed system for collecting data, which is used comprehensively to determine the most financially efficient means for maintaining our roads. Look at this picture here. The Spider van pictured here is named for the lasers and cameras mounted to the frame. It's used by the South Dakota Department of Transportation as a road assessment tool. This van drives up to 15,000 miles per year to collect detailed information on pavement roughness, rutting, and faulting, as well as the depth width, and extent of cracks. This tool provides objective measurements at each mile of the state highway system and allows the Department of Transportation to make well-informed decisions on how and where to spend its limited resources. Now, the Spider van is currently undergoing maintenance work out of state, but I've asked the Department of Transportation to bring it to the state capitol later this session so you can see it for yourself. But the important thing to know is we use Spider van data to classify all state roadways as being in excellent, good, fair, or poor condition. And as you can see from this chart, those 4 ratings are important distinctions. They identify the value of proper maintenance at the appropriate time. Stated simply, it's a lot cheaper to keep a road up than to fix it up. The cost to maintain an excellent road, you can see, is about $360 per mile, about 20% of the cost of maintaining a good road. Likewise, maintaining a good road is about half the cost of one in fair condition, which costs almost $2,400 per mile. Poor roads are a little cheaper because some work can be deferred until the road is replaced. We can use the data we collect from the Spider van as well as information about the different costs of maintaining different pavement surfaces to calculate the ideal distribution of pavement conditions. This chart shows the highest return on investment pavement distribution. In other words, it shows the optimal, most cost-efficient pavement condition distribution for our state highway system. Not surprisingly, if you consider the previous chart, it's most efficient for most roads to be either excellent or good most of the time. And this distribution also reflects the expected lifespan of a newly constructed highway. In other words, when a new highway is constructed, you might expect over its useful life, it will be in excellent condition about 30% of that life, then in good condition for 50% of the time, then fair for 15%, and then poor for 5%, the last 5% of its lifespan. This pavement distribution provides the best bang for our highway dollars. These targets are integrated into a series of calculations that help determine the most cost-effective way to undertake maintenance efforts on our state-owned highways. Now, looking at the chart, one might ask, why is it the most financially efficient pavement distribution to include poor roads on 5% of state highway miles? Well, again, a small amount of pavement should always be in poor condition because it doesn't make sense to spend unnecessarily to maintain a road that's very close to being reconstructed. If we want balanced annual spending on road project, it makes sense that we'd want to keep this ideal distribution constant from year to year. Now, take note of this chart. 50 plus 30, about 80% of the roadway we want in good or excellent condition. I'll reference this cost-efficient pavement distribution again in a few minutes. Now, these 2 charts demonstrate that South Dakota is pretty efficient in the way it utilizes its highway funds. The top chart shows South Dakota's preliminary and construction engineering costs. They're the second lowest in the 9-state region, stretching from Montana to Wisconsin. So you can see we are not wasting money on unusually high engineering costs. We're being good about those. The bottom chart shows our roadway maintenance costs are very low as well. Only North Dakota is better. Overall, South Dakota does an excellent job of keeping highway construction and maintenance costs low. Here's the point. There's not much room to gain new efficiencies within current spending. If we can't spend our current dollars more efficiently, we need to look at whether our current dollars are enough. And unfortunately, our current funding approach has not kept pace with highway construction costs. You can see that here. The legislature implemented the current 22 cents a gallon fuel tax in 1999. That was 16 years ago. I was in the state legislature. Bill Janklow was governor, and we raised the tax to 22 cents in 1999. Gasoline was around $1 a gallon. So the motor fuel tax at that time represented 22% of the total price. That per gallon fee of 22 cents was fixed in statute, and has been the same for the last 16 years. If the legislature had indexed the gas tax for construction costs, the fuel tax would be 45 cents a day, more than double. But of course, it's still 22 cents a gallon. The next chart shows that information in another way, and it really brings to the forefront the challenge that local governments face. In 2003, $1 million would buy 7.8 miles of asphalt overlay on the left there, the lighter bar. It would buy $1.5 million of rural roadway reconstruction, and it'd buy about $400,000 worth of miles, 0.4 miles of urban concrete roadway construction. In 2013, just 10 years later, that same $1 million could build only 4.5 miles of asphalt overlay, only 0.8 of a mile of rural roadway reconstruction in asphalt, and only 0.2 of a mile in urban roadway reconstruction in concrete. In short, in 2003, a county could build almost twice as many miles of roadway than they can today with the same money. We've all seen washboarded gravel, crumbling county oil, and under-maintained section line roads, and it's easy to see why. Remember now the pie chart that I showed you with the ideal distribution of pavement conditions, and we saw that the best distribution was to have 80% of your roadway in good or excellent condition. This slide shows the level of spending needed for just the state highway system, beginning in FY 2017, to maintain the most financially efficient distribution of our road surfaces with 80% in good or excellent condition. You see the green portion of each bar, by far the largest portion, is pavement, maintenance, and improvements. The red bars represent bridge repairs and upgrades. The yellow bars, expansions, that'd be new roadways, new passes, new intersections, new upgrades. And the blue bars required safety upgrades like shoulder widening. The dark line shows our current funding level is not enough. Beyond the state highway funding shortfall, we also know we're short for local bridges. This chart shows all our bridges. The first column, of course, shows who owns them. Look at the bottom row. We have 5,799 total bridges in our state. Anything that's over 20 feet in length is a bridge. So it doesn't matter if it's concrete culverts strung together or it's what we would consider a bridge. In parlance, it's called a bridge if it's 20 feet long and any kind of structure that spans water. As you can see, if you look at the structurally deficient column, almost 1,200 of those nearly 5,800 bridges are structurally deficient. Another roughly 200 are functionally obsolete. Now, this doesn't mean they're in danger of failure. Each bridge is inspected no less than every other year by the state. Doesn't matter if it's county bridge or state bridge, or even if it's on a township road, the state inspects every bridge. But it means the bridges we have, many of which were built in the 1940s and 50s, are not able to accommodate the size and volume of traffic we have today. The vast majority of those bridges, about 83%, are located on county roads. Now, of these, 1,045 bridges are eligible for replacement at an average cost of $230,000 each. To replace all of these structures would cost in total $240 million just to replace the bridges. That's not talking about highway funding, just the bridges. Now, of course, we don't need to replace all of them at once, but spreading out the work over several years in a row, or several years, is a viable option. But we need a mechanism for local units of government to address these deficient structures over time. So let's step back now and look at how do we fund our roads and bridges today. Our funding sources controlled by state and local laws come from a few key areas. The state, on the left you can see, gets revenues from our 22-cent fuel tax. We also get a 3% vehicle excise tax. When you buy a car, it's like a 3% sales tax. And from a variety of smaller miscellaneous sources. At the county level, they also have three sources. The license plate fees, which we raised just a few years ago. the wheel tax, and also local property taxes. The percentage each contributes varies from county to county. And of course, the federal government is also a significant source of transportation dollars. Here's a history of federal highway funding. And some of this highway funding is allocated to local governments, counties and municipalities. You can see that federal earmarks, the red bars, ended after 2009. And we all see the spike created by the yellow bar in 2009. And that was the federal stimulus, which allowed us to address many of our short-term road funding needs and to accelerate highway projects. That's why our highways are in better shape today. But that one-time spike does nothing to address our needs long-term, nor does it provide the funding necessary to maintain pavements over time. Look at the green bars. Formula funding peaked in 2010 and has since been declining. Most experts believe, and I believe, that federal highway funding will remain flat or may even decline further into the future. One news source recently called the situation the slow motion disappearance of the Highway Trust Fund. This is why more than 30 states have now passed transportation funding measures in the last 3 years. We cannot address South Dakota's highway funding needs by waiting for the federal government to act. Our ongoing funding falls far short of the level needed. Remember, our goal is to have 80% of our pavements in excellent or good condition at any given time. Now look at this chart. The blue bars are roads in excellent condition, stacked above our green bars, which represent roads in good condition. We want the top of the green bars to be above the heavy black line, which is representing the 80% of roads in good or excellent condition. If we do nothing, you can see we'll fall below that goal in just a few years. And within 9 years, our pavement distribution will only be 47% good or excellent. And in fact, 25% of our road surfaces, the red bar, will be in poor condition, 25%. It'll be even more expensive then to keep up our roads because roads, as you saw earlier, in fair or poor condition are far more expensive to maintain. It'll be like a snowball rolling downhill, gaining size and speed as it goes. We cannot allow that to happen. Failing to maintain our roads now would be penny-wise and pound-foolish. That is why this session I'm introducing a road and bridge funding bill that I believe meets the need at both state and local levels. Now let me pause and say that I'm familiar with the interim Highway Needs and Financing Committee's efforts this summer, and I appreciate their work. That committee and the LRC did yeoman's work to collect information, inform the public about transportation funding, engage and enlist input from many stakeholders, and to offer options for funding. And I thank the committee for its hard work. I've read their draft bill and I've used some elements of it as I crafted my proposal. Now here's our pavement condition over the next 10 years and how it will be improved if my proposal is adopted. You can see that even under this proposal, pavement condition will still diminish a little over the next few years. Now because of the stimulus, pavements today are a little better than we need them to be. Once things level out, excellent and good road surfaces will be between 70 and 80%, much closer to the ideal 80% distribution. Now here's what I'm proposing. An increase in the vehicle excise tax from 3% to 4% will raise $26 million a year while still taxing less than surrounding states. I also propose that we increase the motor fuel tax by 2 cents this year and by an additional 2 cents each year going forward. A major reason that road funding is insufficient today is because the gas tax does not inflate over time. If we begin to make a small adjustment each year, we can keep up with increasing construction costs and maintain the most efficient pavement condition without putting future legislatures in a bad position in another 10 or 15 years. For local entities, a 10% increase in vehicle registration fees will provide additional road funds, and also help establish a grant program to address local bridge needs. Part of this increase, combined with new and existing state funds, will provide $15 million a year in local bridge funding. I'm also proposing increasing registration fees for non-commercial trucks to 70% of commercial rates this year, then to 80% for future years. The estimated revenue from these changes will generate $39.8 million for the State Highway Fund, a portion of which is allocated to local roads, and $10.7 million for counties, townships, and municipalities. All told, this proposal would provide $50.5 million more for our roads and bridges, $50.5 million. Further, counties and townships have long supported roads with revenue generated from property taxes, and this proposal would allow greater flexibility for counties and townships to generate their own additional funds if proposals win support at the local level. Finally, in addition to these statutory fixes, the state DOT will provide a mechanism for local government entities to swap all of their federal highway funds for state funds, about $22 million each year. The state DOT will also swap all existing accumulated federal funding, about $55 million in total for state funding. Now, why do that? Well, this state-federal funding swap will place entirely on the state the burden of meeting increasingly arduous federal paperwork and regulations. This will give much greater flexibility to counties to best meet their needs. The state has offered versions of this swap in the past, and the expansion of this program will save counties money. In summary, we have 82,000 miles of roadway in South Dakota, many of which are in disrepair. Between local roads and state highways, we could easily spend another $150 million per year. As you've also seen, we have nearly 1,400 bridges that are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. 1,400 bridges. The replacement cost for those structures is about $240 million. Federal funding is flat and even declining, and our congressional delegation, as early as this past week, has told me that holding current levels is the best case scenario. Our state fuel tax has been flat for 16 years. Construction costs in that time have doubled. Our state highway system is the state's most valuable physical asset, and if we want to maintain it, we must act now. My proposal generates about $50 million more this year, and it will, in the long run, permanently fix the current imbalance between road construction needs and funding. You know, last week, Linda and I welcomed the birth of our latest grandchild, Greta, and it reminded me of when our first grandchild, Henry, was born. And I told you, some of you, this story. I asked Henry's dad when he was born how he was going to differentiate between his dad and me. Am I going to be Grandpa and his dad will be Papa or what? He said, well, we're going to call my dad Grandpa Fat. And I said, well, oh, what will you call me? Grandpa Thin? No, we're going to call you Grandpa Cheap. And I suppose that's in some ways not inaccurate, but I'd really prefer I'd really prefer Grandpa Frugal. Grandpa Frugal. You know me, no one wants to raise taxes less than I do. But as I've said before, there's a difference between being cheap and being frugal. A cheap person refuses to spend money even when it would be wise to do so. A frugal person is careful with money, but understands that sometimes spending in the short run is smart and saves money in the long run. That's today's situation. That's what we confront today. Maintaining our roads and bridges is one of the most fundamental functions of government, and it's vital for this year and for decades to come. I don't want to leave this problem to future governors and future legislators and future generations. President Ronald Reagan said, when he proposed a gas tax increase in 1982, he said this, America can't afford throwaway roads or disposable transit systems. The bridges and highways we fail to repair today will have to be rebuilt tomorrow at many times the cost. President Reagan was exactly right. Let's fix this problem for good this year. Of course, while South Dakota's highways are a vital component of our transportation infrastructure, our state needs to maintain an efficient rail system as well. Our roads remain in good condition longer when we use rail. We all know that trucks can take a toll on our road. Let's put that into perspective. One truck with a legal load, causes the same wear on our highways as 9,600 cars. That's one legally loaded truck. One unit train replaces 450 trucks. So rail saves our highways. Our farmers depend upon rail to ship grain using privately owned rail and those owned by the state as well. Last year, South Dakota faced a potential grain storage crisis. And the causes were many. Unusual snow in shipyards, increased demand for oil by rail, and temporary inefficiencies caused by the sale of the Canadian Pacific Line in South Dakota. These problems all limited capacity when we needed greater capacity to handle record harvests in 2013 and still another new record harvest just last fall. Over the past year, I have focused on improving rail transportation in South Dakota. We engaged with the Canadian Pacific as they proposed sale of their South Dakota line. Members of my administration and I also traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with the Secretary of Agriculture, the Secretary of Transportation, and the Surface Transportation Board to draw attention to our rail challenges. Thanks in part to our efforts, but especially with the help of Senator John Thune, our rail carriers have responded and our rail shipping volumes are showing improvements. We're also acting to improve our rail infrastructure for the long term. We completed a new state rail plan just at the end of the year. It's posted online if you want to read it. Last month, I announced $56 million in public and private investments in rail in 4 projects in our state. In response, 2 grain handling facilities worth $40 million each have been announced, one in Kennebec and one in Britain. The state is offering still another $4 million in matching grants to encourage additional private investment in rail. Our modest investments are leveraging millions of dollars in private capital toward building a railroad system that will serve our shippers well for decades to come. Of course, transportation infrastructure is one wise use of state dollars. Another wise use is to increase spending by relatively small amounts to enable greater savings long term. 2 years ago, we announced sweeping changes to our state's criminal justice system, or sweeping study. Leaders from all branches of the government joined key stakeholders to analyze an enormous amount of data and find ways to improve our criminal justice system. Now, that process yielded some big surprises. I knew we had a high imprisonment rate, for example, but I believed that higher imprisonment possibly contributed to greater public safety. Instead, our study showed that prison admissions in South Dakota were 81% nonviolent offenders. And you've heard me say it before. We weren't afraid of them, we were just mad at them, 81% of them. 4 in 10 inmates were returning to prison within 3 years of their release. And despite our continued growth in corrections spending, crime rates were falling in South Dakota more slowly than the national average. In response, the legislature passed the Public Safety Improvement Act, a landmark bill aimed at improving public safety, holding offenders accountable, while reducing long-term costs. And now that we're a couple of years down the road, it's worth asking, how's it going? Well, just 2 months ago, the Oversight Council, tracking our progress, released its annual report. Here are 4 highlights from that report. First, the prison population has remained nearly flat instead of growing, and is slightly below projections that we hope to attain with the reformation. Now it's early, and this should not be overstated. Still, as we'd hoped, this has helped our state avoid constructing a new $36 million women's facility that we had projected might be needed this year. Second, most offenders leave prison on parole. Last year, 60% successfully completed their terms of supervision, up from 45% in 2013. Thus, more former inmates are moving toward becoming taxpayers rather than tax burdens. Third, offenders are sometimes put on probation rather than being sent to prison. Last year, 550 of those probationers earned early termination of probation by complying with the rules. These success stories help reduce probation caseloads and allow officers, probation officers, to focus more attention on higher risk probationers. The fourth highlight from the report I want to mention is more specialty courts are up and running, and I know the Chief Justice has been a great champion of specialty courts. And I'm sure he'll talk about that in the State of Judiciary tomorrow. We've launched Hope Courts in Walworth and Brown counties, and we now have more offenders than ever participating in drug courts, DUI courts, and evidence-based programs in the community. Now, these are all indications that South Dakota is on the path toward improved public safety at a lower cost. That's good for the taxpayers, it's good public policy, and it's the right direction for this state. And I appreciate the leadership of Chief Justice Gilbertson, the work of the court system, the Department of Corrections, of Social Services, local law enforcement, and private providers for their part in this early success. Now, when we began our review of the criminal justice system in 2013, many people believed the work would be incomplete unless we also looked at the state's juvenile justice system. And over the past year, we've brought together key stakeholders to carefully study relevant data and best practices, to consult with stakeholders, and to recommend policy solutions. So this year, I hope you will support my proposals to improve our juvenile justice system. But first, a bit of context. In South Dakota, juvenile commitments to the Department of Corrections have been declining. However, the drop has been much smaller than what other states, including our neighbors, have experienced. In fact, the most recent national figures show South Dakota with the second highest juvenile incarceration rate in the nation. And let me be clear, the high rate is not connected to a commensurately high rate of violent juvenile crime. In fact, South Dakota's juvenile violent crime arrest rate is 1/3 the national average. So we've got a violent crime rate with juveniles 1/3 of the national average, and yet the national average, we're the second highest state in the nation for locking up or putting juveniles in the hands of the Department of Corrections. Our juvenile incarceration rate should encourage us to act, but another encouragement is cost. For most juveniles, commitment to the Department of Corrections means some kind of out-of-home placement. Not for all of them, but for most of them, some kind of out-of-home placement. And that's an expensive thing. Costs range from $41,000 to $144,000 a year, depending upon the program. At the same time, research tells us that supervising and treating youth in their communities instead is less expensive and more effective for many young people. So this leads to a couple of obvious questions. Are there youth sent to the Department of Corrections who could be better served in their communities? And can we save money and hold youth accountable while keeping more of them in their own homes? These and other questions motivated me to join with the Chief Justice and legislative leaders to form the Juvenile Justice Reinvestment Initiative last May. 3 principal goals guided their work, and they're very similar to the goals that the Adult Corrections Work Group had. 1, improve public safety by improving outcomes in juvenile cases. 2, effectively hold juvenile offenders more accountable. And 3, reduce costs by investing in proven community-based practices while saving residential facilities for more serious offenders. The three-branch bipartisan work group met in Pierce 7 times between June and November, with many lengthy conference calls in between. Over the summer, members of this group investigated who was being sent to the Department of Corrections and how long they stayed. Here's what they found. In 2013, 7 of every 10 youth committed to the Department of Corrections were for misdemeanor offenses, probation violations, and status offenses like underage drinking or truancy. Besides status offenses, the crimes that most commonly led to commitment were misdemeanor marijuana possession, misdemeanor simple assault, misdemeanor ingestion of an illegal substance, and misdemeanor petty theft. In fact, there was only one felony offense among the top 10 committing offenses, burglary in the 3rd degree. While fewer youth have been committed over the past few years, remember I said the commitment rate is coming down, even though we're still second highest in the nation, those committed are staying longer. In 2007, juveniles averaged 12 months in out-of-home placement. By 2013, that had risen to 15.3 months was the average stay. And similar trends were seen in the probation data. A judge might not commit a juvenile to the DOC. A judge might say, we're going to put you on probation. Well, admissions to probation have been falling, with more probationers being low risk, lower level, but average time on probation is longer. While the work group was churning through mountains of juvenile justice data, staff from my office made progress on a parallel course, traveling across the state to meet with more than 200 stakeholders. The message they heard was overwhelmingly clear. We can do a better job for youth who veer off track in South Dakota. A few major themes stood out. 1, we need to increase our use of diversion programs to prevent troubled youth from going deeper into the juvenile justice system. 2, we need more evidence-based programming in our communities so that judges have options other than commitment to the Department of Corrections, and so that youth can remain in their homes. And 3, we need better support services for youth and their families so they can confront the challenges that often lead to a child's entanglement with the juvenile justice system. Now, with that feedback in mind and with the data analysis in hand, the work group made 12 recommendations for reform. I'm just going to talk about 3 of them today. I could hear the sigh of relief there. One calls for the development of an array of effective interventions for youth in our juvenile system across our state, including in our rural areas. These interventions would include programs to address substance abuse, alcohol use, drug use, antisocial thinking and behavior, and challenges within the family. We need programs. The availability of such options will help judges as they perform the difficult task of weighing how best to set youth on a better path. It'll also provide court services officers on probation situations and juvenile corrections agents in parole situations or after treatment situations that give them more tools to manage youth in the communities under their supervision. And more importantly, these proven community-based solutions can strengthen families and help keep our communities safer. A second recommendation focuses on which juveniles are placed in the custody of the Department of Corrections. As I mentioned, most juveniles now committed were there because of misdemeanor offenses, probation violations, and minor status offenses. And the work group recommended that only those youth who have committed the most serious offenses and pose a risk to the public be committed to the Department of Corrections. The third item I'll highlight recommends increased use of court diversion for youth committing lower level offenses like teen court, other kinds of diversion. A fiscal incentive could encourage counties to provide diversion opportunities, and many of them have diversion programs, but they aren't utilizing them. Well, let's incent them with money to do that, because if we pay a little bit of money there, save a lot of money elsewhere. Diversion has shown to be more effective than formal court interventions for most youth. Taken together, the work group recommendations are projected to reduce the Department of Corrections population in residential treatment by more than 50% within 5 years. This would save millions of dollars within that system, 50% within 5 years. Now, I'm not the only South Dakotan who's taken this issue to heart. Many others support taking action. In fact, the proposal I'm offering is supported by the Juvenile Justice Reinvestment Initiative Work Group, of course, has been endorsed by the Chief Justice, by the Attorney General, Marty Jackley, the Association of States Attorneys, the Association of Sheriffs, the Association of County Commissioners, the South Dakota Association of Youth Care Providers. These are all formal board endorsements of this proposal. The Network Against Family Violence and Sexual Assault, South Dakota Voices for Children, the Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As you can see, there are many people who have worked very hard to craft and evaluate these proposals. I want to mention two in particular that are in the gallery today. Pennington County Sheriff Kevin Tome was instrumental in developing the Public Safety Improvement Act 2 years ago and has become a nationally recognized expert in justice reinvestment initiatives. He also chairs our stakeholder advisory group. Hughes County Sheriff Mike Leithold served on the Juvenile Justice Work Group this year, and as the immediate past president of the National Sheriff's Association, he has made important contributions. Please help me thank them both for their efforts. Stand up, you guys. Kevin, lean forward so they can see you. It is so helpful when people on the front lines who have a special insight to some of these proposals support them, and I thank you both. As seen in the past, we can do great things when we work together. I want to make sure our government and our taxpayer dollars are producing the best possible outcomes for the young people of our state, and I know you do too. We have a choice to make. We can continue to place juveniles in expensive residential settings that are less effective in addressing delinquency, or we can invest short-term in more effective treatment while keeping our youth close to home and driving down that residential population that I talked about earlier. Please join me in making the right choice, one that improves our juvenile justice system and strengthens our families and communities. Another important area of continued focus is workforce. And for most of the past year, South Dakota has had the second lowest unemployment rate in the nation. We can be proud of that, but it's a double-edged sword. Many business owners struggle to find qualified workers, and this shortage makes it difficult for businesses to expand. 3 years ago, I used my State of the State address to talk to you about workforce. I announced 20 areas in which we are making efforts to address this challenge. But as I've said many times, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Our work in this area requires a persistent focus and a willingness to continue to try new approaches. Last month, I announced one of those new approaches, an exciting partnership between the state and Denny Sanford toward addressing this need. The Build Dakota Scholarship Program will be funded by a $25 million donation from Denny Sanford, which will be matched over 5 years by state future funds. This program will offer full scholarships to students entering high-need workforce programs at in-state technical institutes in exchange for a commitment to work in South Dakota for 3 years. We expect to provide approximately 300 full scholarships annually in the next 5 years, beginning this fall. From 2020 on, an endowment will continue to award approximately 50 scholarships per year. Of course, I first met Denny Sanford years ago because of his generosity to Children's Home Society. And of course, since that time, he's made transformational gifts in healthcare, research, and education. This is yet another transformational gift that will benefit South Dakota and our young people. The establishment of this scholarship will mean that each year, hundreds of our young people and young people from other states will have the opportunity to enter high-demand fields without incurring debt, and that more of them will choose to stay in South Dakota after graduation. The impact of this will be huge, not only for these students, but also for employers and our state. We're continuing other efforts to address our workforce needs. Last spring, I worked with local leaders to convene 6 different workforce summits around the state to inform local leaders about state efforts that we're undertaking, learn from them about their needs, and discuss ideas for cooperation. We analyze the information from these summits and return to all 6 cities where we had the summits to report our findings. Following the summits, I made a financial commitment of $1 million in matching funds to help communities address workforce shortages in their own way. Last week, I announced 14 grants to match these local commitments, with ideas ranging from providing affordable housing to workers to providing access to career and tech ed in rural areas. Toward developing workforce, our career and technical education programs are also important. High school classes in welding, machining, healthcare, construction trades, engineering, biosciences, and more give high school students hands-on experiences and opportunities to explore potential careers while earning high school credit and sometimes college and technical credit as well. Over the past 2 years, we've worked to increase interest in those CTE programs. We've organized and promoted career camps in engineering, information technology, healthcare, and skilled trades to expose students to these high-need career fields. But we're looking to do more. While many of our high schools offer good CTE programs, these expensive programs can be difficult to offer and maintain, especially for our rural schools. So last year, I announced $8 million in Future Fund grants for CTE at our K-12 schools. These grants have helped schools like the Meade County School District expand their manufacturing program and collaborate with Western Dakota Tech to offer a dual credit machining course. Because of success in the first semester, Western Dakota Tech will offer an engine construction and operations dual enrollment course for these high school students. A local business has agreed to offer them internships. In Burke, grant money was used to purchase 4 mobile CTE classrooms used by students from 4 school districts in that area for CTE classes in architecture and construction, engineering, biomedical science, and welding. Without collaboration among those 4 districts, the sections would have been too small to warrant a teacher for each of these courses. The Mitchell School District is renovating and expanding their Regional Career Center, which will provide students from Hanson, Mount Vernon, Ethan, Sanborn Center, and the Mitchell District more opportunities to take CTE classes like welding, blueprint reading, or to get certified OSHA training. Aberdeen is building a similar center. In Yankton, 8 students completed a certified nurse assistant camp. 22 students completed a manufacturing academy. 14 students completed an automotive academy. 13 of those students were from Wagner, Bonhomme, Irene Wakanda, and Menno districts. Even as we strengthen our offerings in high school, we know that more than ever it's important to encourage our young people to continue their education beyond high school. Last year, I proposed and you approved a new low-cost dual credit program to allow high school juniors and seniors to earn university or tech school credit for courses that also count toward high school graduation for only $40 a credit hour. I'm very pleased that this dual credit program has been enthusiastically accepted by our schools and students. We talked about it at the budget address. The enrollment has been well beyond expectations. In the fall semester of the 2014 school year, students from more than 100 public school districts, 1 tribal school, 8 private schools, along with a few homeschoolers, enrolled in dual credit courses. Over 1,000 high school students, these are juniors and seniors only, enrolled in classes from college algebra to composition to diesel engines, and they're doing well. These high school students enrolled in college and tech school courses have a pass rate greater than 90%. As I've said before, dual credit is a win, 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 win. High school graduates who start college or tech school with some credits already under their belts are more likely to complete on time and at less cost. Universities and technical schools get the opportunity to make themselves known to prospective students. and to help prepare those students for success when they graduate. High schools gain flexibility to offer more opportunities to those students at no cost to the district. And the state gets more young people who are ready to succeed and live and work here in South Dakota. Another key focus in workforce is healthcare workforce, and we're making real progress there as well. Over the past few years, we've expanded rural health worker incentive programs and increased the capacity of our healthcare educational programs. This fall, the expanded medical school class begins. The expansion will be fully implemented by 2018, training 60 more medical students in our state than before. We've also funded a program that provides students in medicine, pharmacy, physician assistant, and nurse practitioner programs with 4-week experiences in a rural setting to give them a taste of rural practice. This year, I'm proposing to expand that program to allow up to 30 students to participate up to 15 rural sites. And I'm also proposing we expand eligibility to include clinical psychology, Masters of Social Work, and medical laboratory science students. We won't see the impact of these programs and others like them overnight. These are long-term solutions that require ongoing commitment. But the healthcare providers in South Dakota and I are committed to addressing these issues. As a final workforce focus, I'm particularly proud that we're making strides in our efforts to offer employment opportunities to persons with disabilities. State agencies are partnering with rehabilitation services and school districts to provide work sites for Project Skills program, which provides paid work opportunities for students with disabilities. Students get valuable work experience and businesses get solid workers. We have also eliminated a financial disincentive in one of our Medicaid programs for those with disabilities who want to work. These earlier efforts are achieving good results as more people who with disabilities enter the workforce. For example, 99% of South Dakotans with visual impairments who sought state help in finding competitive employment, not workshop employment, but competitive employment, were successful. And that compares to a national rate of just 89%. All of these workforce efforts are important because thanks to South Dakota's business-friendly climate, we continue to enjoy a strong economy that's adding jobs. Consumer Supply announced the construction of a new state-of-the-art facility in North Sioux City. The plant will produce bagged, pelleted, or texturized feeds and vitamin premixes. 3M announced a $57.6 million expansion in Brookings, including a 44,000 square foot addition and 60 new jobs at the medical products facility. Also in Brookings, Bell Brands cut the ribbon on a $144 million, 170,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility, the largest industrial capital expenditure in Bell Group's history. Ag Growth International announced a new 120,000 square foot high roller production facility in Sioux Falls. The Norwegian company Sapa Extrusions recently announced the expansion of its operations in Yankton, and the company will be adding 50 jobs there. Landsport of Sturgis, which supplies aluminum loading ramps for the trucking industry, announced they would nearly double their manufacturing footprint. Award-winning technology company Sterling Computers announced their company is relocating its corporate headquarters from Nebraska to Dakota Dunes. The state has also continued efforts to promote development in the agriculture sector. Using local control as the starting point, our county site analysis program helps counties use data to proactively identify sites suitable for agriculture-related development. The program was first developed and implemented by the South Dakota Department of Agriculture in partnership with the 1st District Association of Local Governments and Development District 3. The County Site Analysis Program looks at local zoning ordinances, of course defined by the county, locations of roads, utilities, and other infrastructure, and combines this with local permitting requirements. And this information is used to rate property locations on their suitability for manufacturing or commodity processing or livestock-related enterprises. County commissions, planning and zoning boards, and landowners then use this data to make well-informed decisions. Now, investments in agriculture are vital to the long-term sustainability of rural communities, but development must be done responsibly. Not every new project is a good fit in every location. So the program helps county commissioners and landowners determine where projects fit best. Since its launch a year ago, 48 counties, more than we'd expected, have requested a site analysis, and we've completed the analysis in 15 of them. In those counties, local leaders use the data in their comprehensive planning efforts. Landowners have concrete information outlining options for their land, and agribusinesses learn where their investments will be welcomed. I'm proud of this program, and I'm pleased that the National Association of Development Organizations recently awarded this program an Innovation Award for its novel approach to rural economic development. I'm also very proud that just last month, a Colorado State University study named South Dakota the #1 agribusiness-friendly state in the nation. Of course, South Dakota values the outdoors for more than agriculture alone. We emphasize responsible conservation because we love our hunting, our fishing, and our outdoor recreation. 2 years ago, the legislature approved the creation of Good Earth State Park in southeast South Dakota. The park has already welcomed new visitors from South Dakota, Iowa, and elsewhere, and work is being done to design and build a new visitor center. On the other side of the state, bids on the construction of a new Custer State Park Visitor Center will go out this month. Located east of the Game Lodge at the intersection of Highway 16A and the Wildlife Loop Road, this new facility will be situated perfectly to draw visitors. This $5 million facility would not be possible without the generosity of the Leona Helmsley Foundation and the James and Eloise Ellman Foundation, which together provided $3 million toward the cost. We are also taking steps to protect our pheasant hunting heritage. In 2013, we were confronted with a worrisome drop in pheasant numbers. Of course, last year, the numbers bounced back with a 76% increase. Even so, the decline in grassland and CRP acres over the last decade poses a significant challenge to maintaining our strong pheasant hunting tradition. That's why I hosted the Pheasant Habitat Summit in December of 2013 and appointed a work group to evaluate the hundreds of comments, suggestions, and letters that resulted from it. The work group produced a final report that included a series of practical recommendations, and I've already taken steps to implement some of them. One of the primary recommendations was the establishment of the South Dakota Conservation Fund, dedicated to providing financial resources directly to conservation efforts, including pheasant habitat. Tim Kessler, who is a member of the work group, donated $100,000 personally to launch the fund, and since then, others have been stepping forward to contribute. In my budget, I proposed a one-time $1.5 million appropriation to stimulate matching contributions from the private sector to help improve habitat in South Dakota. Every year at this time, I also report to you on our better government initiatives to make the government more efficient, more open, and more accessible. I'd like to briefly do that today as well. 2 years ago, the rules promulgation process for state agencies was public, but if it was online at all, it was difficult to find. And so the state launched a single portal website to help citizens find and follow and engage with the rulemaking process. Just last week, we extended that concept to another area, executive branch boards and commissions. This new portal, boardsandcommissions.sd.gov, is a one-stop site listing board members, meeting notices, agendas, and board packets. Much of this was online before, but it was spread among dozens of different websites and difficult to find. The new portal will make it easier for the public to engage with over 100 boards and commissions. My administration has also worked on red tape repealer efforts. Over the past 4 years, we have proposed and you have passed the elimination of 3,700 sections of obsolete and unnecessary laws and rules, accounting for 411,000 words. I know from my time as a legislator that much time is often spent adding words to the statute books, and I thank you for helping remove some words as well. This year, 11 departments and my office will be introducing 16 more bills to eliminate an additional 305 sections, over 26,000 words, from our laws and rules. I'd also like to update you on our continued efforts to reduce infant mortality. When I was first elected, I was dismayed to learn how many infants were not reaching their first birthday, and that South Dakota's infant mortality rate was higher than the surrounding states. I asked my wife, Linda, who's here, to lead a task force on this important issue. Our First Lady worked with doctors, nurses, tribal health officials, nurse midwives, social workers, and the Department of Health officials to understand the causes of the problem. Private donors have partnered with the Department of Health since then to provide safe sleep kits to low-income families without a safe sleep option. The kit includes a portable crib, crib sheet, sleep sack, informational DVD, children's book, and pacifier. So far, 4,630 parents and other caregivers have received these cribs. I know what they're like. We went out and bought one for use with our grandkids when they're at our house. A media campaign, For Baby's Sake, is focused on safe sleep, early signs of pregnancy, the importance of prenatal care, the importance of immunizations for babies. The Facebook page has reached nearly 500,000 unique visitors. 500,000 unique visitors. The website receives on average nearly 3,000 page views each month, and 79% of those visits are new, meaning it's not the same handful of folks revisiting the site. Significant progress have been made. We don't have 2014 numbers yet, but Linda was just telling me today, reporting now is being made monthly, so we'll soon have 2014 numbers. But South Dakota's 2013 infant mortality rate was 6.5 deaths per 1,000, which is a decrease from 2012's rate. That's 6.5, down from 8.6, so a pretty significant drop. And I'm happy we're seeing improvements. I know there's still more work to do. There's no fixing this problem overnight, and I'm grateful Linda will continue to lead our state's efforts to reduce infant mortality in the next 4 years. Since September 11, 2001, each of South Dakota's 22 National Guard communities has experienced a unit mobilization in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, New Dawn, and Noble Eagle. To date, the South Dakota National Guard has deployed more than 7,200 soldiers and airmen in support of the global war on terror. Today, as I speak to you, for the first time in more than a decade, no soldiers or airmen are currently deployed overseas from South Dakota. No National Guard soldiers or airmen. Of course, the National Guard also serves an important role here at home, and the Guard stepped up again in 2014. In June, 114 Guardsmen provided sandbagging and levee construction support along the Big Sioux River in Union County. Just days later, 268 soldiers with vehicles and equipment were activated to support tornado recovery operations in Washington Springs. It's not surprising that the South Dakota National Guard continues to be recognized for excellence. We have a great Air Guard. The 114th Fighter Wing earned Air Combat Command's first overall highly effective grade during a unit effectiveness inspection. And our 114th Fighter Wing was presented the highly coveted Spots Trophy, presented annually to the most outstanding flying unit in the nation, our South Dakota Air National Guard. 12 Army National Guard units received the National Guard Bureau's Superior Unit Award, which is presented only to units that meet very high standards in drill attendance, physical fitness, weapons qualifications, and maintenance. The Forward Support Company, the 153rd Battalion, Engineer Battalion, won the Army Award for Maintenance Excellence for distinction in maintenance operations in the small maintenance category. And the 153rd Engineer Battalion, for achieving the highest standards for training and readiness, was awarded the Major General Milton A. Record Trophy as the most outstanding Army National Guard battalion in the nation. It's been a pretty good year for our South Dakota National Guard. Let's give them a round of applause. Where's General Rice? General Rice, stand up. Good job, General. Thank you for helping me there. I describe these awards, of course, because it's important we honor those who serve in uniform and recognize the sacrifices they make for our nation and for our state. Of course, we must also remember the sacrifices of those who have worn the uniform in the past, our veterans. Last year at this time, the South Dakota Department of Veterans Affairs kicked off Operation Reaching All Veterans. This is the first kind of operation of its type in the nation. The department set a goal to reach out to South Dakota's veterans with a multi-pronged approach, not wait for veterans to contact us. We reached out and contacted them using an outreach booth here at the Capitol during the session, open houses in all 66 counties, and an aggressive phone campaign. This campaign was a first for the South Dakota Department of Veterans Affairs and a first in the nation. The department started with a list of over 62,000 veterans. Not all veterans are registered at the state. We may not know of their existence at even the county level. So media messages in print and electronic formats were distributed, and 153 open houses were held throughout the state. Starting last April, our staff and veterans services officers around the state were each given a list of 100 veterans to contact every month. This effort allowed staff to educate veterans and their families about benefits, programs, and services. More importantly, it allowed us to listen to concerns and provide key contacts to assist on a local level. Best of all, it gave us a chance to say thank you. One county veterans service officer, Tom Sparrow of Turner County, contacted over 11,000 veterans personally. Tom is here today, and where are you, Tom? Would you stand up? Please help me thank Tom. And next year, our veterans will have a new home. Thank you again for joining with me to provide funding for the new state veterans home. And thank you for your ongoing support of this project. Construction is on time and under budget. Our goal is to open the doors to this new home in January of next year. We are able to be here today because of the service of these brave men and women, and we honor their sacrifices by doing what we can to make South Dakota even stronger. Many of you know that I focused on our state's bond ratings. Recently, Standard & Poor's upgraded South Dakota's outlook from neutral to positive. In doing this, they recognized our state for prudent fiscal management and structural budgetary balance. That's their words. They also noted our state's strong economic growth and pro-business tax climate. Now, that rating is important because it can save our state money in interest payments. I also value it, though, because through outside scrutiny, we can identify ways that we can improve. I am very proud of the many steps we've taken to be good stewards of this state. 4 years ago, we joined together to eliminate our structural deficit. It took tough choices, but we are stronger today because we balanced the budget. Likewise, we joined together 2 years ago to reform our criminal justice system. It took courage to rely on evidence and data rather than instinct, anecdotes, and conventional wisdom. but we're already saving money because of those decisions. We've joined together to use one-time dollars to pay off debts and strengthen our financial position. We've joined together to become one of the few states in the nation with a fully funded pension. We joined together to maintain public buildings and to preserve our outdoors. We've joined together to create jobs through the Building South Dakota bill and to enact programs to train the workers who will fill those jobs. And when our neighbors face disaster, when they face one of the worst days of their lives, we stood with them. We've joined together to stand with them. Whether a tornado in Wessington Springs, a blizzard in cattle country, or a massive river flood. This year, this session, we confront the challenge of transportation funding and the opportunity for reform in our juvenile justice system. Once again, we can join together to strengthen our state and ensure that our best days are yet to come. Let's go to work. Thank you.
Senator Rave moves that the joint session be dissolved. Is there a second? All those in favor of dissolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. We are dissolved. Thank you.
And that will conclude Governor Daugaard's State of the State of address for 2015. Stay with us. We're going to do some reaction interviews from some of our state lawmakers. If you did tune in and miss any of the address, it will be archived online at sdpb.org. The governor talking on a number of things. One of those issues that took up a large portion in the beginning was about road infrastructure, the cost that will go into repairing, taking care of our roads. Some proposals that will be given to lawmakers during this legislative session that includes some tax increases. One of those will be for a 3% to 4% vehicle excise tax increase. We'll also be looking at a motor fuel tax that will go up 2 cents, and it will do that for each year moving forward. We're looking at about $50.5 million, some of that money going to our county, some of that money going to our highway and state system. We'll learn more about that, I'm sure, as we move through this legislative session. Some of the other things that the governor talked about during his State of the State address was juvenile justice reform. Some of you may remember last year we did the criminal justice reform. They did take a look at how that went, and now as lawmakers come together for the 90th legislative session, we'll be looking at juvenile justice reform. One of the things talked about was the high number of juveniles that are put into some of our state systems for smaller offenses, and one of the ways to combat that is to look at shorter-term treatment that can be done closer to home. We'll hear more about that tomorrow from Chief Justice David Gilbertson as he delivers the State of the Judiciary address, which we'll have here on SDPB television and online, streamed at sdpb.org. Workforce, career technical education, one of the issues that was brought up last year, brought up again this year. He also talked about dual credits and what we are seeing from that program. If you might remember, the legislature passed that last year. That would allow students in high school to earn 2 degrees, or I guess not degrees, 2 credits. 1 credit at the college level, 1 credit at the high school level, and for a discounted price. It's $40 per credit. They didn't quite know how that would be taken, and it was very successful as it rolled out last year. So Governor Daugaard presented that to lawmakers as he kind of gave everybody a heads up on what's happened over this last year in South Dakota and some of the things that he hopes to push forward as we we look at this year's legislative session. Some of the other things he talked about, one of the things, the new Veterans Home in Hot Springs, things are moving forward, and the opening of that new home for our veterans is expected to happen around this time in 2016. He also talked about the infant mortality rate and how our First Lady Linda Daugaard has really been working hard to educate families out there on things that we can do to bring down those numbers in terms of infant mortality issues. We're going to do some interviews here. I know Kara Hetland is on the floor of the House of Representatives. We'll talk to Democrats and Republicans. Again, as we work through this year's legislative session, SDPB will be here. We'll be putting together news reports every day on radio. Everything that happens in your state house can be heard online at sdpb.org. You can go to our State House page, listen to committee meetings as they happen. If you want to watch what your state lawmakers are doing in either the House or Senate floor, you can watch it on television. That's SDPB2. The House of Representatives is live every day, gavel to gavel, followed by the South Dakota Senate. And of course, everything that happens here in Pierre is archived at sdpb.org. Sounds like we've got an interview ready now. Kara, we'll throw it down to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much. And Representative Julie Bartling is here from Gregory, Assistant Democratic Leader. Thanks for joining us. Your reaction to what you heard, some of the proposals? Well, you know, it was, I thought the proposals were good. We hadn't heard from the governor with the budget address as to whether or not he was going to get behind any kind of bill for infrastructure needs. And of course, he has relayed one to us that I think the legislature will really take to heart. It does have tax increases. There are going to be pieces I know that we're not going to all agree upon. But it is, I'm glad he has put something out there for us to all talk about. And then work with our local units of government and see how they're feeling about that. Talk to our constituents back home and get a reaction as to what needs to be done. And we certainly do need to do something. I hope that we do not leave this session without doing something to help with the infrastructure. And do you think roads are increase in taxes is going to go over well with your constituents? You know, I don't know exactly how well it will go over, but I think it's probably a necessity. That is really, in our tax-friendly state, that's about the only mechanism that we have in order to improve the roads and take care of some of their deficiencies. So we really do have to have the conversation.
What didn't you hear in his speech today?
Well, I was surprised that we did not hear much about the need for funding and education and the teacher shortage. We didn't hear much about that, of course, in the budget address either. So I wasn't really surprised, but certainly disappointed that there's not been the leadership that I think we need to hear from the executive branch on what do we do for the teacher shortages, how do we address the low level of pay. And so I believe that is going to be a conversation that the legislature themselves are going to have to bring forth, and hope that the executive branch will take that issue along with us, because we absolutely have to do something.
Give me an idea of some Democratic priorities.
Well, we will be addressing the need for funding and education. That has always been a priority for the Democratic Party and the Democratic caucuses. With the 2% increase that the governor has proposed in his budget, that only gets the education back to the level they were in 2010. So they are almost 5 years behind yet. So we need to really take a very strong, proactive look at that and help them out. The Democrat legislators are also still feel that Medicaid expansion is going to be a high priority. There are still a great number of South Dakotans who are without insurance coverage, and we do need to do something to help those individuals so that we can see that all of our citizens have coverage and get quality health care at the right location versus the emergency room.
All right, Representative Bartling, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Stephanie?
All right, I'm now joined by Representative Jean Hunhoff from Yankton, coming from the Senate over to the House. Before we get into that, first, your thoughts on what you heard today.
You know, I was excited in some of the things that I heard today. I was on the summer study that did with the roads and bringing the people together. And, you know, at that point in time, there was not presence or, you know, support or anything coming from the executive branch. And today, I think the groundwork was laid, as the governor alluded to, and the foundation brought forth. And, you know, he is bringing forth his bill. I think the speculation from our bill was omnibus, that I call it, that it covered everything. I think this pulls things through, and I knew in my mind, or I'm believing, there will be some kind of compromise, but it's good to see that there's a recognition that we do have a need out there, and he's putting forth a plan for raising some revenue that may be able to help us to sustain our roads for a longer period of time, as he talked about, so that we don't have those expenses at the end when we're having to fix poor roads.
Now, I mentioned you moving over from the Senate to the House, but you're definitely a veteran here. You've been around the legislature for a while. We've got many new faces, 19 new members this legislative session. How does that impact the first few weeks as you get started in that learning process?
I think what it is, and I'll go back to when I was first over here in the House, you know, it's all coming at you at one time. I'm on appropriations this year, and we have, in the House, we've got 7 new people on appropriations, and in sitting next to them, their comments are, how am I going to get this? How am I going to bring myself up to speed? I think people need to realize that it takes some time, that that's acceptable. It's more important that you understand the process, understand the data that's being presented, and looking at what are the priorities that the governor has put forth in his budget and what are the issues that are out there. So I think my words have been to my colleagues, take a deep breath, slow down, and understand and ask the questions so that you can get comfortable and not make decisions on a whim or whatever the influence is, but to really take that, and that it's okay to do that, because as a new legislator, that's the expectation.
What particular issue or issues will you be focusing on this session?
You know, a couple of things that the governor touched on, of course, the roads, on the workforce. And he certainly identified some great opportunities, and I think the examples he brought together focused on the urban areas. I'm concerned in the rural areas, and especially on the healthcare side. You cannot even find people in the rural areas to provide some basic services out there. So I'm really focused on that. And I think on the other side is on the providers. You know, we've always had our whatever the governor has promoted for what we can afford to do for them. But I think we really have to start looking at all healthcare providers and what that reimbursement is, and looking at our own facilities where we provide healthcare services, because we have to have the workers to take care of the citizens of South Dakota. So that's one area of my interest. I think the other pieces, of course, with education out there, nothing was mentioned here, but that's not to say I know there's issues out there, and I know there are people that are working in directions. How are we going to do that? Because we need to sustain teachers here in South Dakota. It goes along with the juvenile justice. You want to work the best to get these kids on straight paths, but you also have to have them connected in the school systems and helping them to excel so that they do come out with intent and purpose and confidence in themselves that they can be good and productive citizens. So those are some of the areas that I'm looking for. And also with the providers and Medicaid funding, are there some options out there? Because we're continuing to see that population. How are we going to get those services? And providers that are providing for them now, how long will they continue to do that? So I think with the medical home model, there's going to be data coming back. I think there are some good things that are working out, but I think there's hopefully some compromise that we can come to address those needs.
All right, very good. Always good to talk to you. We've got Representative Jean Hunhoff from Yankton. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Kara, back to you.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. And joining me on the floor of the House chamber is Representative Paula Hawks from Hartford. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for asking me.
So let's start and talk about some things that you didn't hear in the speech today that you would have liked to.
You know, we focused a lot in this speech on the physical infrastructure of the state, roads and bridges, but we didn't really focus on the human infrastructure in the state, healthcare, and education. We didn't hear anything about teachers. We didn't hear anything about Medicaid expansion or health care in South Dakota. And those are things that I would have liked to have heard. Those are extreme priorities in this state. While roads and bridges absolutely need to be fixed and we need to maintain that physical infrastructure, we really need to start focusing some more attention on the people infrastructure through health care and education.
And what kind of proposals then do you see bringing to address those?
You know, we've been talking about it. We've been kicking it around for several years now. We just need to buckle down and find a way to expand Medicaid in this state and make sure that those people who need health care and who have a basic need and a basic inability to provide themselves with health care find a way that we can expand that Medicaid opportunity to them. I also think that in the education realm, you know, we talk about increasing teacher pay and what are we going to do to fund teacher pay and what are we going to do to make it more attractive for teachers, and I think that we need to start looking at more creative ways, maybe some programs for loan forgiveness or grants for teachers from a state support level, and finding ways to make the profession more attractive and get them to come here and stay here.
And you hear a lot in the workforce development proposals to, increase and have dual credits and get more kids involved in CTE. You need teachers for those.
Absolutely. And while those programs are wonderful, and you'll never hear me say anything negative about those programs, we also need to consider the long-term effect of offering those programs, and what are we going to do when our teachers retire out and we don't have the teachers going into the programs, we don't have students going into the teaching programs in our state universities or any of our teacher prep programs to replace those teachers who are retiring. And so while those programs are great, they go nowhere if we don't have anybody to teach them.
Do you see, is there a compromise between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to move some of these issues forward?
That's really the only way we get anywhere in this state is through compromise. We all have to learn to work together, to listen to each other's ideas and negotiate back and forth to find what we can both agree on. And I think that we're getting to a point where I'm hearing that discussion opening up a bit more. We're hearing a lot more ideas from both sides, and ideas that I think we can both find some merit to and find some way to come to a common ground.
All right, Representative Hawks, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Stephanie, we're going to go back to you.
All right, thank you, Kara. I'm now joined by Senator Craig Thiessen from Rapid City. You come with the law enforcement background, so I want to talk to you about the juvenile justice reform, what the governor talked about, and your thoughts.
I think in many ways it's a follow-up to the justice reform, the adult reforms that we did 2 years ago. We have some preliminary results from that. The early results are good, I think. I think it's only proper that we look at juvenile justice reform. From what I can see with the bill, and it's just really sort of hit our desks today, it seems like, many of the issues are the same. We struggle with having treatment options available in rural areas. That was the same thing we saw with the adult reforms. And so we have, kids in this case going into Department of Corrections because there's really no other place to give them the services that they need. And so I think we try to invest in those upfront services, do better supervision, and put fewer kids taken away from their family and sent to Department of Corrections.
I want to talk to you about some of the issues that you are hoping to push this session. Anything you've already introduced or you're looking at introducing?
I have a couple of bills being drafted. I'm going to introduce a bill this year again to increase legislator pay, simply because I think we make it too difficult in this state for people to serve. And so I'm going to introduce a bill to increase the pay, and I also have a bill on felon voting.
All right, it looks like we've got a gavel in from Speaker Dean Weeks, so I think for now we're going to say goodbye. Thank you, Senator Craig Thiessen.
Thank you.
All right, and that does wrap up our coverage for today's State of the State address. Right now, the House of Representatives has gavelled back in, so it gives us a good time to say goodbye. As always, for more information on anything we do here at SDPB, visit us online at sdpb.org. For Kara Hetland and everyone with the SDPB team, I'm Stephanie Rissler. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.